Part 1. The Invincible Arrogance. I stand in the cold snow, carving a white stone face with my only remaining hand. My right arm is completely gone. It was crushed under the massive, heavy weight of my own arrogant pride many years ago. Every strike of my hammer is a painful memory. I was once the greatest general in the entire kingdom. My name is Valerius. I was incredibly young, handsome, and completely undefeated in battle. I wore shining golden armor. I believed my brilliant mind was an absolute weapon. I thought I was a perfect god of war. I never listened to the secret intelligence officers. I ignored their reports completely. I believed my aggressive battle tactics were totally flawless. My massive ego was my closest friend. But my deepest shame was my younger sister, Elara. She was a military nurse in my camp. Elara was a quiet, fragile girl. She hated the terrible sounds of war. She trembled violently every time she saw dark blood. She cried when she wrapped the soldiers' wounds. I looked at her with pure, intense disgust. I thought she was the ultimate disgrace to our proud royal family. We were preparing for the biggest, most important battle of the war. We needed to march our massive army through the dark, narrow Black Canyon. The intelligence officers sent an urgent warning. They suspected a deadly enemy trap in the canyon. I threw their report directly into the fire. I believed my army was an unstoppable, solid wall of steel. I told my officers we would crush any enemy trap easily. Later that night, Elara came into my large tent. She looked terrified. She fell to her knees on the dirty floor, begging me to change our route. "Please, Valerius," she cried softly, grabbing my heavy boots. I hear the dying soldiers talking in the medical tent. The enemy is waiting in the canyon. It is a suicide mission. Do not take your men into that dark place. We will lose everything. Her weak, crying voice made my blood boil with intense anger. I thought she was trying to spread terrible fear through my brave camp. I pulled my boot away and slapped her hard across the face. She fell backward onto the hard floor, holding her red cheek. "You are a pathetic coward," I ordered coldly, staring at her crying eyes. "You bring shame to my army. Return to the medical tent and stay quiet. I will march through the canyon tomorrow and I will win." I turned my back, ignoring her absolute terror. Part 2. The Midnight Traitor. The night before the massive march was incredibly dark and quiet. I could not sleep. I walked through the sleeping camp, feeling the exciting, familiar thrill of upcoming battle. My golden armor shined faintly in the moonlight. I expected a glorious, perfect victory the next morning. I walked near the edge of the dark forest. I suddenly saw a small, suspicious shadow moving quietly between the trees. Someone was sneaking out of the secure camp. I pulled my sharp sword from my belt. I moved silently through the wet grass, following the dark figure. The figure stopped near an old, dead tree. A strange man wearing dark clothes stepped out of the shadows. The figure from my camp handed the stranger a small, leather tube. I recognized the stranger immediately. He wore the dark green colors of an enemy spy. I rushed forward with explosive speed. I knocked the enemy spy to the ground, but he managed to escape into the thick forest. I grabbed the person from my camp roughly by the shoulder. I pulled the dark hood back violently. The moonlight revealed a familiar, terrifying face. It was my weak, fragile sister, Elara. She stared at me with wide, terrified eyes. I snatched the small leather tube from her shaking hands. I opened it quickly and pulled out a thin piece of paper. My heart stopped completely. It was a highly detailed military map. The map showed the exact route, the timing, and the specific troop formations for our march through the Black Canyon. My own sister was actively giving our most sensitive secrets to the enemy. She was a disgusting, filthy traitor. The betrayal burned my soul like hot fire. "You sold our kingdom to the enemy," I stated with absolute, freezing hatred. "You gave them our path because you are a coward. You wanted them to win so you could avoid the battle. How much gold did they pay you for our lives?" Elara did not answer my angry questions. She did not cry or beg for mercy. She just looked at me with a strange, calm sadness. Her silence made me even more furious. I dragged her back to the center of the military camp by her hair. I threw her into a dirty wooden cage. I locked the heavy iron door myself. "You will stay in this cage until I return from the canyon," I promised her coldly. "When I win this battle, I will execute you in front of the entire army." Part 3. The Canyon of Blood. The morning sun rose, painting the sky a terrible, dark red. I ordered my massive army to march directly toward the Black Canyon. My officers were nervous because the enemy had the map. But my arrogant pride refused to change the plan. I wanted to prove I was invincible. We marched deep into the narrow, dark canyon. High, rocky cliffs surrounded us on both sides. The air was cold and completely silent. I rode at the front of the army on my beautiful white horse. My trusted deputy commander, Cassius, rode closely beside me. Cassius was my best friend and my brother in arms. He always supported my aggressive tactics. We rode deeper into the shadow of the mountains. Suddenly, the terrible silence was broken by a loud, deafening explosion. The enemy did not attack us with swords from the front. They attacked us from the very top of the high cliffs. They used massive black powder explosives to destroy the edges of the mountains. Huge, heavy boulders rained down on my trapped army like a deadly meteor shower. The perfect, solid wall of steel was crushed instantly. Men and horses screamed in pure agony. Thousands of my brave soldiers were buried alive under tons of falling rock in mere seconds. The ground shook violently. My horse panicked and threw me onto the hard, rocky ground. The canyon quickly became a massive, horrific river of blood. I looked up through the thick, gray dust. A gigantic, falling boulder was dropping directly toward Cassius. He was completely frozen in fear. I did not think about my own safety. I lunged forward, pushing my best friend out of the deadly path just in time. But I was not fast enough to save myself. The massive boulder crashed down, pinning my right arm completely against the ground. The heavy stone crushed my bones, my muscles, and my flesh instantly. The pain was absolute, blinding, and totally unimaginable. I screamed until my vision went dark. My surviving guards rushed forward. They had to use a sharp sword to cut my ruined arm off completely to pull me free. They dragged my bleeding, half-dead body out of the deadly canyon. The great, invincible general was completely broken in a single, devastating moment. Part 4. The One-Armed Judge. I woke up in a dark medical tent days later. A terrible, burning pain radiated from my right shoulder. I looked down and saw a flat, bloody bandage where my strong arm used to be. My sword arm was gone forever. My glorious military career was permanently destroyed. I walked out of the tent, stumbling weakly. The camp was a horrific nightmare. Tens of thousands of my men were dead. The survivors were crying, bleeding, and entirely broken. The Invincible army was a pathetic ruin. My massive, golden pride was completely crushed into the dirt. Cassius gathered the surviving soldiers in the center of the camp. He stood on a wooden box, shouting with fake, dramatic anger. "We were betrayed." Cassius screamed to the angry crowd. "The general's sister gave the map to the enemy. She murdered your brothers in the canyon." The soldiers roared with absolute, violent fury. They wanted revenge for the massive slaughter. My mind was completely clouded by the intense pain and my own deep humiliation. I needed someone to blame for my terrible failure. I needed a target for my crushing, dark anger. I walked toward the wooden cage holding Elara. She looked incredibly thin and pale. She saw my missing arm, and tears finally filled her eyes. I did not feel any pity for her. I believed she was the sole reason my perfect life was destroyed. I did not organize a formal military trial. I did not ask for a judge or a jury. I was completely consumed by my own dark madness. I ordered the guards to drag her out of the cage. I was going to use her blood to calm the angry soldiers. "You are guilty of high treason and mass murder," I declared loudly, my voice echoing over the angry crowd. "I sentence you to death by firing squad at dawn. Your cowardly blood will wash the canyon clean." I looked at her with pure, unforgiving hatred. Elara did not fight the guards. She did not scream for mercy. She just looked at my bloody shoulder and bowed her head slowly. She accepted the brutal sentence without a single word. I turned my back, eager to see the traitor die the next morning. Part 5. The Silent Execution. The next morning was incredibly cold and gray. A thick fog covered the broken military camp. Thousands of angry, wounded soldiers gathered in the large dirt field. They stared with pure hatred at the heavy wooden post in the center. The firing squad stood ready with their bows. The guards dragged Elara to the post. She wore a simple, thin white dress. She looked tiny against the heavy wood. The guards tied her hands and her feet tightly with thick ropes. I stood a few meters away, wrapping my only hand tightly around my heavy sword belt. I wanted her to break down. I wanted her to cry and beg for her miserable life. I wanted to see the coward finally panic. But Elara did not cry. She stood perfectly straight against the wooden post. Her calm, peaceful eyes searched the angry crowd until she found my face. She looked at me with a strange, incredibly deep love. There was no anger or fear in her expression. It was the look of a mother protecting a foolish child. Her total, absolute bravery confused my mind. A tiny seed of terrifying doubt began to grow in my dark heart. The archers raised their heavy bows, pulling the sharp arrows back. The tension in the air was completely suffocating. Before I gave the final order, Elara looked directly into my eyes. She moved her pale lips slowly, ensuring I could read her silent, final words perfectly. "Look inside me," she mouthed silently. "Look inside me." I frowned, completely confused by the strange, final message. I raised my single hand into the cold air. The crowd held their breath. I dropped my hand down sharply. The deadly order was given. Dozens of sharp arrows flew through the gray fog. They struck her small body with a terrible, heavy sound. Elara gasped once. Her head fell forward, her dark hair covering her face. She died instantly, without making a single sound. The traitor was finally dead. The angry crowd cheered loudly, feeling a sick sense of justice. But I did not feel any victory or relief. I stared at her small, bleeding body tied to the wood. Her final, silent words echoed endlessly in my mind. Look inside me. The nightmare was only just beginning. Part 6. The Devil's Mistake. I ordered the guards to bury her body in an unmarked grave near the edge of the forest. I walked back to the medical tent to clear out her personal belongings. I wanted to burn everything she owned. I wanted to erase her completely from the history of my family. I opened her small, wooden medical box. It was filled with simple bandages and cheap medicine. I threw the items onto the floor angrily. But as the box emptied, I noticed a strange, uneven gap at the very bottom. I used a knife to pry the wooden board up. A small, folded piece of paper was hidden perfectly inside the secret compartment. I unfolded the paper with my single, trembling hand. The letter was sealed with dark red wax. The wax seal bore the official, secret emblem of the enemy's highest military commander. I began to read the letter. The terrible, super twist exploded in my brain, completely destroying my entire reality. The letter was written by Elara. She had intercepted a secret message weeks ago. The message proved that Cassius, my trusted deputy and best friend, was the real, original traitor. Cassius had been secretly selling our troop movements to the enemy for months. Elara discovered his massive betrayal. But she knew a terrifying, fatal truth. Cassius was loved and worshipped by the entire army. If a weak nurse accused the great deputy commander of treason, no one would believe her. If she exposed him without absolute proof, Cassius would divide the army. The soldiers would fight each other, creating a massive, bloody civil war right before the final battle. The kingdom would fall immediately. Elara had to find a way to stop the enemy without destroying our own army. She created a brilliant, suicidal plan. She drew a completely fake, decoy map. She intentionally gave the fake map to the enemy spy, ensuring I would catch her. She wanted me to believe she was the traitor. She took the blame to keep the army united behind me. The decoy map instructed the massive, main enemy army to march into the deadly, sinking mud of the Death Swamp. The attack in the canyon was just a tiny, minor ambush organized quickly by Cassius. She traded her own life to trap the main enemy force and save the kingdom. Part 7. The Swallowed Secret. I dropped the letter onto the floor. I fell to my knees, gasping for air. The crushing, agonizing weight of my terrible mistake paralyzed my lungs. I killed her. I executed an innocent hero to satisfy my own arrogant, foolish pride. She died to protect the brother who hated her. But the letter contained one final, mysterious sentence. I protected the only real map to the enemy capital. She wrote at the bottom of the page, "Cassius is looking for it. I hid the real path where no traitor can ever find it. The secret is completely safe." I remembered her final, silent words at the execution post. Look inside me. The terrifying, gruesome realization hit my mind like a heavy hammer. She did not mean I should look into her heart or her soul. She meant the instruction perfectly, physically, literally. I grabbed a sharp medical scalpel and a heavy iron shovel. I ran out of the tent into the dark, freezing night. I ran to the edge of the forest where the guards had buried her. I dropped to my knees in the dirt. I used my only hand to dig frantically. I dug through the cold, hard earth until I reached her small body wrapped in a simple white cloth. I cried loudly, apologizing to her silent, pale face. I took the sharp medical scalpel. My hand shook violently as I cut through the thin fabric of her dress. I performed a crude, desperate autopsy in the dark forest. I cut into her cold stomach. I searched through the blood and the digestive fluids. My fingers finally brushed against something hard and smooth. I pulled it out into the moonlight. It was a thick capsule made of hard wax. I broke the hard wax open. Inside was a small, perfectly preserved piece of parchment. It was the real, highly detailed map showing the secret, unguarded mountain pass directly into the heart of the enemy capital. The timid, fearful nurse had swallowed the most important military secret to protect the kingdom. Part 8. Wrath of the Cripple. I held the bloody map tightly in my only hand. My sister used her own stomach as a locked vault to protect my future. She was 1,000,000 times braver than I ever was. A massive, cold, and totally unforgiving wrath replaced my deep sorrow. I had to destroy the real monster. I covered her body respectfully and walked back to the camp. I went directly to my dark command tent. I placed the bloody map on my wooden table. I did not have to wait long for the devil to appear. The tent flap opened silently. Cassius stepped inside, holding a sharp dagger. He saw my missing arm and smiled a cruel, arrogant smile. "You look terrible, Valerius," he whispered in the dark. "I need the real map to the capital. I know she hid it somewhere before she died. Tell me where it is, and I will kill you quickly." He thought I was just a weak, broken cripple. He lunged forward, aiming the dagger directly at my heart. But my mind was totally clear, fueled by the burning memory of my sister's sacrifice. I stepped to the side quickly. The dagger sliced deeply into my left shoulder. I ignored the sudden, intense pain. I threw my entire body weight forward. I slammed my heavy, metal boots into his knees, knocking him to the floor. I dropped down on top of him. I only had one hand, but I had the furious, unstoppable strength of absolute revenge. I wrapped my single, strong hand completely around his thick throat. He dropped the dagger and clawed desperately at my arm. He tried to breathe, his eyes widening in pure panic. I squeezed his neck with every ounce of power I possessed in my body. "This is for Elara," I whispered coldly into his ear as his face turned purple. I watched the life slowly fade from his arrogant eyes. He stopped fighting. His arms fell to the floor. I held his throat until his body was completely, permanently still. The true traitor was finally dead. Part 9. The Final Strike. I hid Cassius's dead body under a heavy rug in my tent. I could not tell the army about his betrayal yet. They were still grieving, and the truth would destroy their morale completely. I wrapped my bleeding shoulder tightly. I walked out of the tent and blew the massive war horn. The surviving soldiers gathered quickly, looking tired and hopeless. "Listen to me," I shouted, holding the bloody map high in the air. "We were beaten in the canyon. But the war is not over. We have the secret path to the enemy capital. We march tonight." The soldiers saw the fierce, crazy determination in my eyes. They followed their one-armed general into the dark mountains. We marched silently for 3 days, using the secret paths drawn on the map my sister had swallowed. We bypassed all the heavy enemy defenses perfectly. We reached the edge of the enemy capital just before dawn. We expected a massive, bloody battle at the city gates. I ordered the men to prepare their weapons. We charged forward, breaking the wooden gates open. But the super shocking twist completely stunned my entire army. The massive capital city was completely empty of soldiers. There were no archers on the walls. There were no swordsmen in the streets. The city was completely unprotected. We marched directly into the royal palace and captured the enemy king without losing a single drop of blood. The brilliant, beautiful reality of my sister's plan finally became clear. Her decoy map had worked with absolute perfection. The entire enemy main army had marched directly into the death swamp, completely trusting her fake intelligence. They were permanently trapped and sinking in the mud miles away. Elara had won the entire war completely alone. She did not use swords or golden armor. She used her brilliant mind, a fake piece of paper, and her own tragic death to destroy the greatest enemy our kingdom had ever faced. I stood in the captured palace, weeping silently for the true hero. Part 10. The Stone Sister. The war was officially over. I returned to our kingdom as the greatest military victor in history. The king organized a massive, beautiful celebration in the capital square. Thousands of citizens cheered my name. The king stood on his high balcony, holding a massive gold medal. General Valerius, the king announced proudly, "You are the savior of the kingdom. I offer you the highest royal title, a mountain of gold, and a giant golden statue in the center of the city." The crowd roared with absolute joy. I walked slowly up the marble stairs. I stood before the king and the cheering crowd. I did not kneel. I took the golden armor off my chest and dropped it onto the floor with a loud crash. "I am not a hero," I shouted, my voice echoing over the silent square. "I am an arrogant, blind fool. I confess to everything. I told the kingdom about Cassius's betrayal. I told them about the decoy map, the swallowed secret, and the innocent nurse I had murdered." The crowd listened in total, horrifying silence. I threw my general's sword onto the pile of armor. "The true savior is dead," I whispered. "I refuse the titles and the gold." I walked away from the kingdom forever. I traveled to the highest, coldest mountain in the north. I built a small, simple wooden cabin. I lived completely alone, far away from the violence and the pride of men. I found a massive, flawless block of white marble near a frozen river. I brought it to my cabin. Every single morning, I take a heavy iron hammer and a sharp steel chisel. I use my only remaining hand to strike the cold stone. It is slow, agonizing, exhausting work. Days turn into months. Months turn into years. My hair turns completely white. My body grows old and tired. But I never stop carving the stone. I carefully shape the delicate eyes, the gentle smile, and the brave posture of the girl who saved the world. I will spend the rest of my lonely life carving this statue. It is my eternal punishment and my only purpose. The invincible general died in the canyon. Only a broken, one-armed brother remains, forever trapped in the cold snow, trying to rebuild the beautiful angel he so foolishly destroyed.